Good morning, everyone. I'm Raymond van Jaarsveld, and this is my partner, Jayson van Rooyen. Today we will be presenting CCNA 1 and 2, routing and switching in the practical field. Basic components for a network. Before creating a network, there are important basic components to be inserted within the network. Routers are used to route between networks. A switch is a constituent of computer networks that connects two network slides and or two networks, switches and routers together. VTY allows you to remotely connect to a network. Security is used to secure network and to prevent hackers to hack confidential information with the network. Addressing table. A Class 4 network is a network addressing architecture using the internet from 1981 until the introduction of classes inter-domain routing in 1993. The method divides the IP address space for Internet Protocol version 4 into 5 address classes based on the leading 4 address bits. We use Class 4 networks. Both terms refer to a perspective on the structure of a subnetted IP address. Classless addressing uses a 2-part view of IP addresses, and Class 4 addressing has a 3-part view. With Class 4 addressing, the address always has an 8, 16, or 24-bit field based on the Class A, B, and C addressing rules. We use an addressing scheme to help organize the network. It contains all the information on our network IP addresses, so it is a useful piece of information to have. It contains our IP addresses, our subnet masks, interfaces, and the names of our devices. It is structured so that each interface, IP address, and subnet mask is listed next to the device it is associated with. An addressing scheme is clearly a requirement for communications in a computer network. Basic configurations. When purchasing a new network, it's on factory setting. So the following should be configured. Hostname, you must name the device. Line con 0, you plug a cable from a PC or laptop straight into the router to create a connection. Next, banner MOTD, you must have a displayed message that will say, warning, no unauthorized access. Next, passwords. You don't want any unauthorized people entering your device, hence a password is needed. Encryption. Enabling the service password encryption will encrypt all clear text passwords in the configuration. Next, SSH has 2 versions, but we use version 2 and requires a domain name to be set up. Next, it also requires a crypto key, and then all of this is for remote management. VLANs. Types of VLANs. Management VLAN. A management VLAN is any VLAN you can configure to access the management capabilities of a switch. Your configured management VLAN has an IP address and subnet mask assigned to it. Any of the switch's VLANs could be configured as the management VLAN if you have not configured or defined a unique VLAN to serve as the management VLAN. In some cases, a network administrator proactively defines VLAN 1 as the management VLAN. This enables a loophole for an unauthorized connection to a switch. Next, data VLAN. A data VLAN that can also be referred to as a user VLAN. This is configured to carry only user-generated traffic. The importance of separate user data from the other type of VLAN is proper switch management and control. Next, voice VLAN. A voice VLAN is configured to carry voice traffic. Voice VLANs are mostly given transmission priority over other types of network traffic. Communication over the network is not complete without phone calls. More calls are made over the network than other forms of the message transmission. Sending emails and text messages are also forms of interrelations, but listening to a real voice provides legitimacy and assurance. Second last, Second last, default VLAN. At the initial boot up of the switch, all switch ports become a member of the default VLAN, which makes them all part of the same broadcast domain. This allows any network device connected to any of the switch ports to communicate with other devices and on other switchboards. On Cisco switches, the default VLAN is always VLAN 1. VLAN 1 has all the features of any VLAN except that you cannot rename or delete it. Lastly, native VLAN. A native VLAN is assigned to an 802.1IQ trunk port that supports traffic coming from many VLANs as well as traffic that do not come from a VLAN. The 802.1Q trunk port places untagged traffic on the native VLAN. In summary, the native VLAN observes and identifies traffic coming from each end of a trunk link. A virtual VLAN is any broadcast domain that is partitioned and isolated in a computer network at the data link layer. LAN is the abbreviation for local area network, and in this context, virtual refers to a physical object recreated and altered by additional logic. A broadcast domain is a logical division of a computer network in which all nodes can reach each other by broadcast at the data link layer. A broadcast domain can be within the same LAN segment, or it can be bridged to other LAN segments. Remote management requires username and password. This is for the line B2Y. On our packet tracer that we'll soon show at the end of the video, we configure trunking on our VLANs and port security. On interface F0/0, we set up port security that would send us a syslog message if a violation occurs. This port is a sticky port with a max of 2 MAC addresses. It dynamically adds a configuration file when detected. We disabled all unused ports for security purposes. Our ports were manually configured as access ports, and we assign VLANs to our interfaces. Next, switch port security. We configured, named, and assigned VLANs. We set up our ports as access ports. The switch port security feature is an important piece of the network switch security puzzle. It provides the ability to limit what addresses will be allowed to send traffic on individual switch ports within the switched network. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I will now hand over to Jayson van Rooyen.
Thank you. Good morning, my name is Jayson, and our presentation deals more on the practical side of CCNA switching and routing. Right, implementing routing information protocol, which is RIP for shorthand. There are 4 steps we take when configuring RIP. First, we use the command router RIP, followed by the command version 2. This enables RIP version 2 on our router. Next, we specify passive interfaces. This stops multicast updates from going out the interface. However, updates from other RIP speaking neighbors are allowed. Lastly, we specify which networks to advertise with the network command. RIP is a distance vector routing protocol, which employs the hop count as a routing metric. RIP prevents routing loops by implementing a limit on the number of hops allowed in a path from the source to the destination. Here are some examples of other routing protocols. As you can see, there are many other different routing protocols that can be implemented on a network. RIP is actually quite old compared to other routing protocols. These other routing protocols would include OSPF, which stands for Open Shortest Path First, BGP, which is Border Gateway Protocol, and Enhanced Interior Gateway Protocol, which is EIGRP. We didn't cover, oh wait, never mind, it's not there. Okay. Network address translation. There are not enough public IPv4 addresses to assign a unique address to each device connected to the internet. NAT is used to convert a private IP address into a public IP address that can be used to access the internet. There are 3 different types of NAT: static, dynamic, and PAT. Static NAT is a one-to-one mapping of a private IP address to a public IP address. Dynamic NAT can be defined as mapping of a private IP address to a public IP address from a group of public IP addresses that is called a NAT pool. In our network, we implemented static NAT for our file server. We also configured dynamic NAT with PAT using the pool name JRayPool. We used a /30 subnet mask since we only needed 2 public IP addresses. Here is some configuration steps when setting up DHCP, and there's some screenshots showing you how it works. PAT, port address translation, is an extension to network address translation that permits multiple devices on a local area network to be mapped to a single public IP address. The goal of PAT is to conserve IP addresses. This method is also known as overloading or NAT overload. For example, if there are 100 inside local addresses and 10 inside global addresses, PAT uses ports and as an additional parameter to provide a multiplier effect, making it possible to reuse any one of the 10 inside global addresses up to 65,536 times. This is what most home routers do. The ISP assigns one address to the router, yet several members of the household can simultaneously access the internet. This is also the most common form of NAT. As you can see, there are many advantages to using NAT. It increases the flexibility of connections to the public network, provides consistency for internal network addressing schemes, and it provides a level of network security. It also conserves public IP addresses, but there are also some disadvantages. It degrades the performance of your router. End-to-end functionality is also degraded, and end-to-end IP traceability is lost. But I think in some cases that might be an advantage. Tunneling becomes more complicated, and initiating TCP connections can be disrupted. ACLs, access control lists. These limit user access on a network. With an ACL, we can deny any user from accessing any website. We could allow students to access sites such as Google and YouTube, but deny them from accessing Facebook and Instagram or 9gag, as Joshua mentioned earlier. In our network, we set up a standard ACL so that all IP addresses belonging to the 10.10.10.0/24 address space were allowed. Extended ACLs allow you to permit or deny traffic from specific IP addresses to a specific destination IP address and port. It also allows you to specify different types of traffic, such as ICMP, TCP, UDP, etc. Needless to say, it is very granular and allows you to be very specific. Standard ACLs allow you to evaluate only the source IP address of the packet. Standard ACLs are not as powerful as extended ACLs and can't distinguish between the types of IP traffic, but they are less CPU intensive for the device. Dynamic Host Control Protocol. In computer science, the Dynamic Host DHCP is a network management protocol used on internet protocol networks, whereby a DHCP server dynamically assigns an IP address and other network configuration parameters to each device on the network, so they can communicate with other IP networks. DHCP requires us to set up a pool and pool name. We also have to exclude certain addresses. The IP DHCP excluded address command may be used to reserve addresses that are statically assigned to key hosts. We need to assign a subnet mask and default gateway for DHCP as well. Lastly, we need our network address. In our network, we only configure DHCP on VLAN 30. I'll be handing back the presentation to Raymond now.
Right, habits, positive habits and negative habits. Positive habits, activity log was to keeping track keeping track of our progress in the course. Next, keeping attentive in class and always giving attention to during our classes and keeping our concentration high priority. Negative habits, procrastination, and also late on some assignments for chapter exams and other important assignments that was late due, but we could have it in later on. Learning insights gained, knowledge of networking essentials like networking and switching, and for the skills acquired was for network configuration. So in future we will be able to configure our own network anytime of anywhere on the world. I will now go back now with Jayson van Rooyen with our PVD feedback.
The PPD sessions this term were very interesting and insightful. I feel like I gained a lot of insight. We had a comprehensive array of fascinating topics to discuss. We have tried to apply the laws of requisite variety to our lives, whereby we should have multiple ways. We should be able to look at a problem in multiple different ways and try to figure out some or other method to overcoming it. The PPD sessions regarding aesthetics and how it applies to ethics were also very captivating and intuitive. It's interesting to think about how beauty affects the way we view good and evil. Overall, we had an exceptional experience with the PPD sessions this term. And we'll now be showing you a fairly long video of our packet tracer configuration. Thank you.
Is that your video?
Yeah, this is going to take a while.
Can you explain what's happening then?
Well, we're just setting up, we're just doing the network configuration. Right there, we're doing passwords. Yeah, we did a crypto key over there because you need it for SSH. That just gives you 2 retries if you get it wrong. That's a timeout command, so you can't be inactive on the network.
Is that for one little block, or is it for...
Now we're setting up VLANs and their names.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, is that for one switch?
Yeah, this is on a switch.
Yes.
This is the switchboard security stuff. Oh no, that's access. One faster. Which words? It's still just setting up of VLANs and trunking. There's the native VLAN.
Is that telling the one to block what it has to do to the next one?
No, I wouldn't say so. That's activating an interface, and there we deactivating an interface. That's more switchboard security stuff. That's that sticky MAC address. It's the violation restrict. So it sends a syslog message.
I noticed a single question mark.
And we had a notepad on the side. Here we set up the default gateway. Now we go over to the router. ncaps.1q, more IP addresses. It's very repetitive. That's for the native VLAN. That's the, I think that's the parent. So you also have to activate that, and it activates the rest. As you can see, a bunch of text came up after that. These are passive interfaces, IP routes. That's just a little warning that it gives you. It's the full name for, oops. I think I forgot something there. It's almost done. As you can see, all the commands are very case sensitive. Well, not case sensitive. You have to type it in correctly, otherwise it doesn't work. Yeah, we're just specifying the inside and outside interfaces. And there's our ACL and wildcard mask. And that's it. Thank you for listening. And that's all.